This is Dead Serious, a show about short horror stories worthy of discussion. I'm Dead Palette, and why do they call it a drug dog if it's not made out of drugs? Today we're going to be taking a look at a post on Ask Reddit. The question is, cops and other law enforcement people of Reddit, what were some cases you worked on that made you think, even if for a moment, that something supernatural/paranormal was going on? And we're going to read the top comment from this, the top response. Now, obviously, this should be about fictional stories, correct? But, people lie on Reddit, and I'm going to be working under the assumption that this is a lie, since ghosts aren't real, checkmate, theist. The post is by DTNS13 with 4,000 upvotes. I've been in law enforcement for nearly 6 years, and I've had a few supernatural things occur during my shifts. The most recent one came from a 911 hang-up call. I was riding two-man on a summer night, and it was probably around 2 or 3 a.m. when I got a call for a 911 hang-up. The only call comments was a call placed to 911, and upon answering it, the person hung up. Man, I would not want to be the person who reads this law enforcement officer's report. When dispatch attempted to call the number back, no one answered. The area in which I was working this night, I have basically spent my whole career in. Man, not well-formed sentences or paragraphs here. This is a little frustrating. There aren't, without an E, a whole lot of streets I had yet to respond to. However, the address this call came in from, they used GPS coordinates to find the closest location since the caller hung up, I had never been to. I had driven past this road many times, but never actually revived a call from it. Revived? Maybe like received a call from it? Man, I really hope there aren't cops out there with this level of writing skill. We pulled up to this old dirt road. I'm going to take this patrol car to the old dirt road. And it was a metal chain gang going across the entire entrance with a sign saying no trespassing. Because we have to figure out what was going on, me and my partner continued on foot up this long dirt/gravel road. The road was maybe about 100 yards long. The shitty part was that on each side of the road was a tall chain link fence. Why this thing was crappy was because now me and my partner were now walking down a fatal funnel. If there happened to be a guy waiting for us at the end of this road, let's just say, with an assault rifle, we would have no place to take cover. Thankfully, that did not happen. I don't think I'm crazy when I'm reading this. This is just very, very poor sentence structure, not conveying ideas well. And presumably, this is allegedly real. This is not, this is not a good conveyance of the facts of this totally true, real thing, because people on Reddit never lie. But on the substance of what is being discussed here, the fear that a law enforcement officer would have, the idea that they're being funneled down to an area where an assault rifle would be very effective. I don't know that a law enforcement officer would be using the term assault rifle, but they do know terms that sound jargony like fatal funnel. It's regardless. They might say, automatic or whatever. Anyway, digress. We eventually reach the end of the road, and there are two houses on each side. At first we believe one of the houses is where a 911 call had come from. I am shining my flashlight at one of the houses. I see a figure move inside. Instantly, I'm like, oh shit, people actually live back here, as I thought for sure the houses were going to be vacant. Shortly after, a man and a woman walk outside and ask what's going on. We tell them that we receive a 911 hang-up call from address 123 Main, made up. So like they're making up it because they don't want to tell you the actual thing, and asked if they had called. Well, the name of the street isn't the only thing that's made up in this story. The man tells us his address is 124 Main, and that one street across is 125 Main, which he says is vacant. He proceeds to tell us there is a 123 Main, which is basically in the middle of these tall weed/forest looking area just to the north of his house. He says the house is vacant and run down and can only be reached on foot. I ask him how far away it is from his house, and he says probably a couple of football fields away. All right, so all of this is ringing true. These are things that can actually happen. This kind of investigation is probably something that people are familiar with. If they're a law enforcement officer, I'm sure they've come across a story like this, had something like this happen to them, where they go into an area that's, supposedly off limits, no trespassing. That's automatically going to put fear in you, heighten the fear because, what if you're mistaken for an intruder? These kinds of things, very, very visceral fears that I'm sure a lot of people have to deal with. Now, while all this walking/investigating was going on, we had received a think 2 more 911 hang-up calls. Same address, same result. Before we made this trek out to the middle of the woods, we received another car, and eventually another 2-man unit responded. The 4 of us now wandered out into the woods, 2 of us with our assault rifles out, and followed a barely beaten path to where we assumed we would find a house. Fighting spider webs and low-hanging tree branches, we eventually reached our destination. I'm terrible at describing things, but this house was straight out of any horror movie you want to imagine. It was run down, had a tree that had fallen through the middle and had now become incorporated with a house throughout the years. The house was nearly falling apart and was completely overgrown by greenery. Having come this far, we decided to continue on. We thought we were pretty sure the house would be vacant. Okay, so a clearly deserted house, and the phone call is coming from there. That is basically the crux of this story, of this tale, of this factual event that is being recited to us from a Reddit user. That is a good idea, and I actually overall like the concept of this story. Man, it really needs a second draft with, the words tightened up, the actual word, the craftsmanship of the sentence structure and that kind of thing. But the lack of being able to describe, we're not expecting someone to be this very verbose, poetic, purple prose writer. If they're a cop, those things don't necessarily go hand in hand. We don't think of it that way. So the fact that they're not having they're coming up at a loss to describe this house is a nice touch, but they say I can't describe it very well. And then they low key have some good descriptive things in there, like the house being incorporated with the surroundings and the tree falling through it and the overgrown greenery. I'm picturing this very well. This is a low key, really visual story. I'm overall enjoying this. After fighting through some thick brush, we find our entrance. We had to climb over some fallen brick walls and other wooden shit before we actually make entry. My biggest fear at this point is this stupid rotting house collapsing on itself and being trapped inside with no one being able to find us. We searched the entire... Why would people not be able to find you? You're police officers. Presumably they know where you are, and if you come up missing, I hope someone's going to come for you. We searched the entire house, and like we had thought, no one inside. Again, man, the grammar. And when we say we searched the entire house, I mean the entire house. Nothing was left unchecked. Feeling satisfied, we had climbed our way back out of the bullshittery and started heading back towards where the 2 original houses were. As we walk back, dispatch radios us and tells us they received another 911 hang-up call coming from the same address. This time, dispatch tells us that they were able to make out the call back, and when the person answered, they could hear what sounded like a child playing on the phone. Alright, so the story's going to give us a little bit more than what we already had. The 4 of us look at each other and decide we're done with this call. We had done everything we could up to that point, and we're not about to get called back into a possibly a demon's house because a child was on the phone. Child is in scare quotes. We cleared the call and don't receive any more 911 hang-up calls for the rest of the night. Okay, so I do wonder if there are any law enforcement officers out there. What do you do in that scenario? If like you get a 911 call from an abandoned house, or you know, you just get a 911 call, you show up there, and then there's nothing. Like, you know, in this case, it's an abandoned house, but you know, any kind of whatever nothing it is, do you just like, I don't know, there's nothing there. Bye. I hope no one was in danger. Fast forward maybe 6 months and it's dead ass cold winter. 911 hang up from the same address. This time it's me and 3 guys who weren't there previously. I tell them the story of what happened and all 3 are super psyched and want to go check it out. The 4 of us walk back out to this house, now much easier to get to since the cold had killed off a lot of the greens. I do like that detail of like, you're working with other people and you're telling them like, hey, I had this experience. And maybe it's like an area where it's slow for law enforcement. You get a lot of like very simple calls or whatever. It's a less dangerous area or whatever. So there's nothing exciting. And then it's like, yay, haunted house. The 3 of them decide to go into the house. I wait outside as I'd already had my fun. They don't make it too far once they realize this house is about to collapse on itself. We all leave again. No call back from a child this time. I even go out there again. If I ever get to go out there again, I'll try to get a picture of the house just so when people tell me this story, they can have a better understanding of how fucked this house actually is. This is some really good ashcan horror. It's really down to earth. It's actually surprisingly believable. But when you actually like think about like, hey, you're getting 911 calls from a house that doesn't have, you know, probably doesn't have a working telephone, you know, that's what breaks the immersion for me. Not to say that this should change or anything like that. This story is what it is, and I enjoy it for what it is. And it does have overwhelming ashcan elements outside of that. And that is the idea. Inject a little bit of bullshit and do an otherwise believable story. I do not believe that this actually happened. I did enjoy this little bit of this thread. Let me know what you think about this in the comments below, whether you believe this is possible or not. Reading down a little further, we're getting a comment from Deleted, so their account was deleted. Bad GPS coordinates. There was a report last year how some various emergency service systems that utilize things like cell phone GPS, etc., can get an address giving false coordinates. Usually it's really noticeable, like calls from Virginia giving you coordinates from Maine. Sometimes it's not. There's more to this comment, but let's see the response from the author DTNS13. Yeah, don't get me wrong, I could name off a few more likely reasons why this call played out the way it did. I vaguely remember dispatch also giving something about a call bouncing off a nearby radio tower. Not sure what that has to do with anything. It just has the same sequence of events happening that freaked me out. Obviously not bad enough to keep me from going back a second time. Very, very plausible. Okay, so we're kind of getting an explanation now how it's just, system malfunctions rather than anything actually haunted. So, yeah, all right. And then there's also the explanation of, the cell phone. I guess that, it is cell phone coordinates. I didn't really consider that. I was thinking of a landline for whatever reason, even though those hardly exist anymore. Anyway, this was a fun experience. I had a good time on this. Thank you, Ask Reddit. And let's get on to our sponsor of the day, which is Ghost Tasers. Ghost Tasers. Just because what's attacking you isn't alive doesn't mean that you shouldn't have less than lethal options.